"Mama can't walk anymore," the boy said, and the cowboy lifted them both into his cabin. The snow had been falling long enough to erase intention. What had once been a road was now only a pale idea pressed into white ground, a memory the land was already forgetting. The boy stopped first. He was small for his age, bundled in a coat that had once belonged to someone taller, stronger, still alive. He turned back, boots sinking, and looked at his mother. She stood frozen in place, one hand gripping a fence rail that trembled under her weight. "Mama can't walk anymore," he said. Not loudly, not as a plea, as a fact. The woman, Elena Cross, did not correct him. She had reached a point where pretending cost more than truth. Her leg had been hurting since before dawn, a deep grinding pain that no longer came and went. Now it stayed. It held her in place like an anchor dropped through bone. The wind moved across the open land in long, unbroken breaths. It carried the smell of snow and something older, cold that had no interest in mercy. Elena tried once more. She shifted her weight. The pain flared sharp and fast, stealing air from her chest. Her knee folded. She would have fallen if the fence hadn't caught her. The boy rushed forward, dropping the sack he'd been dragging. It landed with a soft thud, all their remaining belongings inside. He placed both hands on her leg, as if it might listen to him. "I can help," he said quickly. "I can pull you, or you can lean on me." Elena knelt in the snow. The cold soaked through her skirt instantly, biting hard. She forced a smile because he needed it. "Oh, Caleb," she whispered, "you already have." She looked around. The sky hung low and gray, the kind that promised more snow, not less. The town they'd left was hours behind them now. The farm they'd hoped might take them in had gone dark before they arrived. For the first time since she kept herself moving out of pure will, Elena wondered if this was where the walking ended. Then the boys had lifted. He squinted into the wind. Someone's coming. At first she thought it was Hope playing tricks. But then she saw it too, a shape moving against the white. Slow, steady, darker than the storm around it. A horse, and a rider. The man saw them before he reached the fence. He slowed his horse and dismounted a few steps away, boots crunching softly. He kept his hands visible. His voice, when he spoke, was low and careful, shaped to carry without startling. "Afternoon," he said. "You folks all right?" Caleb moved instantly, stepping in front of his mother. He stood straight, chin lifted, doing his best impression of someone bigger than he was. "Mama can't walk anymore," he said again. "She hurt her leg." The man crouched so he was eye level with the boy. Snow clung to the brim of his hat. His coat was worn but well cared for, mended more than once. "What's your name, son?" "Caleb." He nodded. "And your mama?" "Elena." The man turned his attention to her then. He didn't rush. He noticed the way she held herself, the swelling at her knee, the exhaustion she hadn't been able to hide. "I'm Jonah Reed," he said. "My cabin's about a mile from here. Storm's coming in harder tonight." Elena opened her mouth to refuse. Pride rose automatically, thin but stubborn. She had been leaning on it for weeks. Jonah was already shrugging out his coat. "No trouble," he said, as if answering words she hadn't spoken. He draped it over her shoulders, the warmth immediate, the smell with smoke and horse leather grounding. "I can walk," she said, though even she could hear the weakness in it. Jonah shook his head once, not unkindly. "You can't," he said. Caleb nodded. "That's what I said." Jonah slipped one arm behind her back, the other beneath her knees. She gasped, not in pain but surprise, as he lifted her cleanly from the snow. She was lighter than she should have been. He noticed. He didn't comment. Caleb grabbed the sack and hurried alongside them as Jonah turned toward home. The cabin appeared to the storm like something earned rather than given, low and solid. Smoke rose from the chimney, stubborn against the wind. Jonah pushed the door open with his shoulder and carried Elena inside. Warmth rushed out to meet them. The room was small but steady. A fire burned low on the hearth. A kettle whispered. One table. 2 chairs. A bed built to last. Jonah set her down carefully, easing her legs straight. Elena bit her lip, refusing the sound that tried to escape. Caleb hovered close, eyes wide, taking in every detail. Sit by the fire. Jonah told him gently, warm up. He knelt and unlaced Elena's boot. Her sock was damp, her ankle swollen and angry. Old injury? He asked. She nodded. It comes back in the cold. Jonah pressed a warm cloth against it, his hands rough but precise. Outside, the wind rose. Inside, the fire held. And somewhere deep in Elena's chest, a question stirred she hadn't dared to ask yet. Had they just stepped into a shelter, or into something that might change all of their lives? Night settled in layers. First came the quiet, the kind that presses close when snow thickens and the world narrows to whatever light you can make for yourself. Then came the sound of wind whirring the cabin walls, testing the seams, learning their shape. Inside, Jonah Reed moved with practiced ease. He added a split log to the fire, adjusted the kettle, then stepped back as if giving the room time to breathe. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, coat still around her shoulders. The warmth reached her slowly, cautiously, like an animal that had been chased off too many times to trust right away. Her leg throbbed in time with her pulse. Pain had become familiar, but rest felt strange, dangerous, even. Caleb had done exactly as he was told. He sat on the floor near the hearth, palms open to the fire, eyes fixed on the flames as if memorizing them. His shoulders had finally dropped. The long day had loosened its grip. Jonah handed him a tin cup. Milk, he said. Warm. Caleb accepted it with both hands. Thank you, sir. Jonah smiled at the sir, just barely. He turned back to Elena. There's stew on, he said. It's simple, but it'll put something back in you. I don't want to take, she began. You're not, Jonah said gently but firmly. You're eating. He ladled stew into a bowl and brought it to her. The smell alone made her throat tighten. She hadn't realized how long it had been since she'd eaten something hot while sitting down. She took the bowl. Their fingers brushed. She flinched, more from the suddenness of kindness than the contact itself. Thank you, she said quietly. Jonah nodded, as if this was simply how things were done. They ate without hurry. Outside, the storm announced itself fully now. Snow struck the walls in soft, relentless taps. The wind rose and felt like breath taken by something very large. Caleb finished first. He slid close to the bed and leaned against it, cup empty, eyelids heavy. He fought sleep for a few minutes out of habit, then gave in. Elena watched him, chest tight. Only once she was sure. He slept did she let her own guard slip. I didn't think we'd make it past the day, she said. Jonah sat in the chair opposite her, elbows resting on his knees. Firelight carved deep lines across his face. A lot of folks don't, he replied. You did. Barely. Barely still counts. She looked at her hands. They trembled faintly now that they no longer had to work. We weren't always like this, she said, not sure why she was explaining. There was a house, a piece of land, a plan. Jonah didn't interrupt. He'd learned that silence could be an invitation. My husband died 2 winters ago, she continued. Sickness, quick and slow at the same time. After that, everything else followed, like it was waiting its turn. Jonah nodded once. He didn't say he understood. He didn't need to. I didn't know where else to go, she said. So I kept moving. As long as I was walking, I could pretend I was choosing. Her voice faltered. She stopped. Jonah rose and added another log to the fire. Sparks leapt, brief and bright. You don't have to decide anything tonight, he said. Storm will keep you here at least a day, maybe 2. And after? He looked at her then, really looked, not with pity, with assessment, with care. After, he said, we'll see. The word re-landed heavier than she expected. Later, Jonah showed her where extra blankets were kept. He wrapped Caleb carefully, tucking the edges so no cold could sneak in. The boy sighed in his sleep and curled closer to the warmth. Elena lay back at last. The mattress was firm but forgiving. Her leg protested when she shifted, but Jonah was there, adjusting, supporting, never rushing. "Try to sleep," he said. "I'll be right here." She watched him return to his chair, hat set aside, hands folded loosely as if he were standing guard over something fragile. The fire cracked softly. The kettle sighed. For the first time in weeks, Elena let her eyes close without fear what might happen if she did. Outside, the storm gathered itself for a long night. Inside, 3 lives rested under one roof, not knowing yet how tightly they were about to be woven together. Morning did not arrive all at once. It came in pieces, thin light slipping to the frost-rimmed window, the slow softening of the wind, the fire settling into a bed of coals that glowed without flame. The storm was still there, but it had stepped back, as if satisfied with what it had already taken. Jonah was awake before the light. He always was. He moved quietly, mindful of the 2 shapes on the bed. Caleb slept twisted sideways, one arm flung over the blankets, breath deep and even. Elena lay on her back, hands folded at her middle, face drawn tight even in rest. Pain had not left her. It had only loosened its grip. Jonah poured water into the kettle and set on the coals. He stepped outside for a moment, boots sinking deep. Snow stood high against the cabin walls now, pressed close like it meant to stay. The sky was heavy and white, no edge to it anywhere. They weren't going anywhere today. Inside, the kettle began to murmur. Elena woke to warmth and the sound of careful movement. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then memory returned, slow and heavy. The road, the fence, the lift into strong arms. She tried to sit up. Pain answered immediately. She gasped despite herself. Jonah was at her side before she could say a word. "Easy," he said. "You moved too quick." "I didn't mean to." "I know." He helped her shift, propping her slightly so the weight came off her leg. The relief was small but real. She closed her eyes and breathed through it. Caleb stirred then, blinking awake. He sat up fast, panic flashing across his face until he saw her. "You're still here," he said. She smiled. "So are you." He slid closer and leaned against her shoulder. "Is it still snowing?" "Yes," Jonah said, "and it plans to keep at it." Caleb considered this. "That's all right," he decided. "We're warm." Jonah handed him a piece of bread spread thick with fat and a little honey scraped from the bottom of a jar. The boy took it like a gift meant only for him. Elena watched, heart tightening. It had been so long since someone had fed her son without calculation. Jonah brought her tea. Steam rose between them. "This will help," he said. "Won't fix anything, but it helps." She accepted it. Their fingers touched again, and this time she didn't pull away. The day unfolded slowly. Jonah split wood near the door, keeping the pile close. Caleb insisted on helping, carrying small pieces and stacking them carefully, tongue caught between his teeth in concentration. Elena watched from the bed, a quiet ache settling behind her ribs. Gratitude, fear, the sharp edge of hope she wasn't ready to hold yet. At midday, the pain in her leg dulled from sharp to deep. Jonah knelt and examined it again, pressing gently, watching her face. "Swelling's still there," he said, "but it's not worse." "That's something," she replied. He wrapped it tighter, his movement steady and sure. "I've seen worse heal," he said, "but it takes time." Time. The word felt heavy. That afternoon, as the light faded early, Caleb grew restless. He wandered the cabin, touching everything. He found a small tin of charcoal stubs and a scrap of paper tucked beneath the table. He knelt by the hearth and began to draw. Jonah watched him for a moment. "What's that?" "A horse," Caleb said without looking up. "Yours." so it won't be lonely outside. Jonah turned away, throat suddenly tight. He hadn't realized his horse looked lonely, or that he did. Later, when Caleb dozed again, Elena spoke softly. "You don't live with anyone," she said. Jonah shook his head. "Not anymore." She didn't ask why. The fire popped, sending sparks upward. Outside, the storm began to ease, though the world remained locked in white. Elena leaned back against the pillows, exhaustion tugging at her. "I don't know what happens after this," she said, "when the snow clears." Jonah met her gaze. "You don't have to know tonight," he said again. "Just heal." She nodded, though uncertainty lingered. As night returned, the cabin glowed steady and small against a vast quiet outside. And for the first time since her leg had given out, Elena felt something she hadn't expected at all. Not rescue, but the beginning of being held. The storm loosened its grip on the third morning. Not all at once, but enough to change the sound of the world. Instead of the constant scrape of wind and snow, there were pauses, spaces, the soft, settling hush of flakes finally coming to rest. Light filtered through the window in clearer lines, pale but honest. Elena noticed it before she opened her eyes. She shifted carefully, testing herself. The pain was still there, deep and stubborn, but it no longer burned. It felt contained, as if it had agreed, for now, to stay where it was. Jonah was already up. She could hear him outside, shovel biting into packed snow, breath puffing white. Each scrape came slow and measured. He wasn't fighting the storm. He was negotiating with it. Caleb stood at the window, hat pulled low, nose nearly touching the glass. "He's making a path," he whispered, as if afraid to interrupt something important. Elena eased herself upright. With effort, she swung her legs over the side of the bed. The floor was cold beneath her feet, grounding. She took one step. Her knee protested, but it held. Caleb turned. His eyes went wide. "Mama, I know," she said softly. "I know." She stood there, breathing through the ache, letting the weight settle evenly. It wasn't strength yet, but it was progress. Jonah came in moments later, stamping snow from his boots. He froze when he saw her standing. "You shouldn't." "I can," she said, steadying herself on the table. "Just a little." He studied her face, then nodded. "All right, little." He set food out, simple, warm. The three of them ate together for the first time at the table. No rush, no tension, just a quiet scrape of spoons and the fire breathing nearby. After, Jonah brought a chair close to the door, so Elena could sit and watch the world return in pieces. The sky had lifted. Snow lay thick but smooth, untouched except for Jonah's careful path. Caleb followed him outside for a few minutes, bundled and watched closely. He laughed when snow slid from a low branch onto his shoulders, the sound bright against the stillness. Elena closed her eyes and listened. She hadn't realized how long it had been since laughter didn't hurt. That afternoon, Jonah showed Caleb how to check the trap line near the trees. They moved slow, leaving clean tracks. Elena watched from the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, sunlight warming her face. When Jonah returned, he carried a rabbit, clean, quick, respectful. Elena looked away, then back. Survival, she knew, didn't wait for comfort. "I can cook," she said later, surprising herself. Jonah hesitated. "Only if you sit when you need to." She did. Her hands remembered what her body had not yet forgiven. She stirred the pot slowly, leaning on the counter when the ache rose too high. Jonah stayed close, not hovering, just there. That night, after Caleb slept, the conversation came without force. "You could stay," Jonah said quietly, "until you're stronger." Elena stared into fire. The flames reflected in her eyes, steady and patient. "And then?" she asked. Jonah shrugged. "Then we'll see." The words were the same as before, but this time they felt different, less like delay, more like invitation. Outside, the world rested under snow. Inside, something fragile began to take shape. Not a plan, but a possibility. The snow stayed another 2 days, then began to loosen its hold. It didn't vanish. It never did, but it softened, slumped, pulled away from door frames and fences, as if admitting defeat in stages. Water began to drip from the eaves, slow and steady, tapping into a tin pan Jonah set beneath the roofline. Each drop sounded like time restarting. Elena marked the change in her body the same way. Each morning, she tested her leg a little more. Weight first, then balance, then a careful step, without holding the table. Pain still lived there, deep in the joint, but it no longer ruled her. It negotiated now, allowed movement in exchange for patience. Jonah watched without comment. He had learned not to crowd recovery. Caleb, on the other hand, narrated everything. "Mama walked 4 steps today," he announced solemnly, as if reporting to history itself. And she didn't even make the face. Elena laughed before she could stop herself. The sound surprised her. It felt rusty, like a gate swung open after years of stillness. Outside, the land reappeared inch by inch. Fence posts emerged first. Then the long curve of the road they had almost disappeared into. It looked smaller now, less important. One afternoon, Jonah brought out an old sled from behind the cabin. The wood was scarred, the rope frayed but strong. Caleb's eyes widened. "Is it still good?" Jonah gave it a tug. "It'll hold." They took it slow. Caleb rode first, whooping as Jonah pulled him across a gentle stretch near the trees. Then Jonah let him pull, showing him how to lean into the rope, how to use his weight instead of fighting it. Elena sat on a stump nearby, wrapped in her coat, watching. She hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding herself until that moment, braced against the idea that joy was temporary, borrowed. When Caleb ran back to her, cheeks flushed, he grabbed her hand. "Your turn when you're better," he said, already certain of a future she hadn't allowed herself to imagine yet. That night, the wind was quieter. The fire burned lower. Jonah mended a strap at the table, while Elena folded blankets, her movement slow but sure. "I've been meaning to ask," she said carefully, "why you live this far out." Jonah didn't answer right away. His hands kept working. "Used to be closer to town," he said finally, "closer to people. And then I learned I could hear myself think out here." Elena nodded. She understood the need for space that wasn't empty, space that let grief stretch without tearing. Caleb fell asleep mid-sentence that night, sitting upright with a stick of charcoal in his hand. His drawing slid to the floor. Jonah picked it up later. It showed 3 figures in front of the cabin. One was taller than the others. All were standing. The next morning, Elena insisted on walking outside. Jonah cleared a wide, careful path. He offered his arm. She took it this time without hesitation. The cold bit at her face. The ground was uneven, but she stood beneath the open sky again, breathing air that didn't smell of sickness or fear. They didn't go far. Just enough. She stopped, leaning lightly against Jonah, and looked around. "I don't know what comes next," she said. Jonah didn't look at her. He looked at the land, the trees, the cabin behind them, smoke lifting clean into the pale blue sky. "You don't have to know," he said. "You just have to decide if you want to keep healing here." The word here settled between them. Elena closed her eyes. For the first time since her husband's death, the future did not feel like a door slamming shut. It felt like a room she hadn't explored yet. And when she opened her eyes, she realized something quietly, steadily, undeniably true. They were no longer just passing through. Spring arrived the way it always does in places that have suffered. Carefully, the snow did not vanish overnight. It thinned. It retreated. It let the earth breathe again. Patches of dark soil appeared near the cabin first, then along the tree line, then finally across the open stretch where the road once mattered so much. Elena walked it every morning. Not far, never far, but farther than the day before. She leaned less on Jonah's arm now. Some mornings she didn't take it at all. Pain still lived in her leg, a quiet reminder of how close she had come to losing more than movement. But strength had returned, not sudden, not dramatic, earned inch by inch. Caleb marked the changes with pride. She walked to the fence today, he announced one afternoon, as Jonah stacked firewood. Tomorrow she's going to the tree. Elena smiled, pretending not to hear. Jonah only nodded, as if this were the most reasonable plan in the world. Life settled into something steady. Jonah repaired the roof. Elena took over more of the cooking, insisting on it even when her leg protested. Caleb learned the rhythm of the land, when the birds returned, where the sun hit longest, how to tell when rain was coming by the way the air changed its mind. One evening, as dusk stretched long and golden, Elena stood at the doorway watching Jonah and Caleb work together near the fence. Their movements matched without effort. One lifted, the other steadied. No words needed. She realized then that she had stopped counting days. That night, after Caleb had fallen asleep, Elena spoke the question she'd been carrying. "We can't stay forever without being something," she said. "Not guests, not strays." Jonah sat quietly, hands resting on his knees. "I know." She took a breath. "I don't want charity. I want work. I want roots." Jonah finally looked at her. His eyes were steady. Unafraid. "There's land that needs tending," he said, "and a cabin that could use more than one pair of hands." The fire popped softly between them. Elena nodded. The decision did not feel heavy. It felt right-sized, like something she had been growing into. The following weeks brought change, not all easy. Some days her leg flared, and she had to sit while Jonah worked. Some nights the old grief rose without warning, catching her breath mid-task. Jonah never rushed her through it. He understood the quiet work of surviving. Caleb thrived. He grew stronger, louder, more certain of his place. He stopped asking when they would leave. One afternoon, a traveler passed by on horseback, slowing when he saw smoke rising. Didn't know anyone lived out here. The man called. Jonah glanced at Elena. "We do," he answered. The man nodded, tipped his hat, and rode on. Elena felt something settle deep in her chest. Belonging does not always arrive with ceremony. Sometimes it slips in quietly, when you're not watching for it anymore. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the cabin gold, Caleb brought Elena a drawing. It showed the cabin again. The fence, the tree, 3 figures stood in front. All upright, all close. "This is home," Caleb said simply. Elena pulled him into her arms, careful of her leg, and held him there longer than usual. Jonah stood in the doorway, watching, saying nothing. The road beyond the cabin remained empty, but inside, the fire burned steady. 3 lives, once bent nearly to breaking, now moving forward together, not because the world had grown kinder, but because they had found warmth where they thought none remained. Sometimes healing doesn't look like going back. Sometimes it looks like staying. And sometimes the moment you stop walking is the moment you finally arrive. If this story moved you, take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe for more heartfelt frontier stories like this one.